our guests here at the table and also to our guests here in the room. We don't have our nameplates, and you all have all of your nameplates. So what we'll do is go around the table and do some very, very quick introductions of us, and also have you all introduce yourselves. But before we do that, I want to thank just want to be effusive in our praise and appreciation, even though we haven't heard what you had to say yet, for the caliber of talent that's come together from the Urban Land Institute to give us some, what we hope will be very instructive and critical feedback about how we make our capital city even better than what it is. And so we want to thank you for your time and commitment and your dedication to this cause. Jennifer Kalinsky, we want to thank you, and Chris Edwards, who is somewhere in the building, for your staffing on that end, for your staffing and support. Commissioner Miller for the idea and helping to bring this element of our work forward. With that, I look forward to some really what I hope will be powerful feedback that we'll be able to then take from here and move forward. Before we do that, again, I want to begin with my colleagues. Commissioner Ziffer, we'll start with you with quick introductions, and we'll make our way around.
I wouldn't want to correct the mayor, so my name is Gil Ziffer, Commissioner.
Did I call you something else?
No, you introduced me.
Oh, okay, there it is.
You already did it. This is Commissioner Miller.
Yes, and we've had a delightful time. I had the opportunity to spend dinner with everyone last night, and so that was really nice.
Great. I'm Andrew Gillum, Mayor of the City of Tallahassee.
Anita Favors Thompson, City Manager.
Curtis Richardson, City Commissioner.
Keep going. I'm Tom Murphy. I'm a senior resident fellow at ULI and a former mayor of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mayor.
I just met Bill Peduto. I don't know if he's...
I know Bill.
Okay, good guy.
I'm Lou Shelley. I'm the city attorney.
I'm Russ Irvin, architect with Irvin, Lovett, and Miller in Jacksonville.
And I'm Paul Lewis. I'm the Chief Planning Manager with the City of Orlando.
I'm Mike Frumpkin, the Dean of the College of Health and Public Affairs at UCF.
I'm David Powell, a lawyer at Hopping Green and Sam's here in Tallahassee.
I'm Christopher Jones, president of RDBG Consultant. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Awesome.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Reed. I'm the president of the RAM Professional Group, a civil engineering, landscape architecture, and planning firm.
And good evening. I'm Dale Brill, the obsessive thinker at ThinkSpot, based here in Tallahassee, Florida. We do public policy and economic development consultants.
Awesome. Thank you, Dale, and thank you, each of you. Our colleague, Commissioner Maddox, is here. He'll be sitting here, and I'll introduce him in his absence. David, I think we're going to kick it over to you for introduction, and I'll let you all carry it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. First of all, let me say how much we have enjoyed the intensive work we've been engaged in, not just the last couple of days, but the preparation. I mean, as you can see, there was a lot of homework involved in this project, but I think we've all learned a lot, and we've enjoyed the challenge a great deal. It really was only about a month ago that the city and ULI agreed to set up this technical advisory panel. And so all of this has come together in the space of 4 or 5 weeks, which in the grand scheme of things, the way ULI does business is what I would characterize as warp speed. It's been very quick. It's been very intensive, but it's also been very satisfying. We have 8 panelists. They've introduced themselves. 6 of them are from out of town. 2 of us are from Tallahassee. All of the people on the panel are experts in their respective fields. All of them have done this without any compensation. They've done this out of a spirit of service. They've done this because they believe in the mission of ULI, and they believe in the Healthy Places Initiative, and they wanted to make a contribution in particular to the challenges here in Tallahassee and in South City. We are going to go through a presentation that's going to give you an overview of our recommendations. It's in the form of a PowerPoint, so it'll be in that normal abbreviated bullet point fashion. But within 6 to 8 weeks, we will have a final written report that will flesh out and discuss in detail the recommendations that you're going to see in abbreviated form here this evening. There are a number of things you have asked us to address that will be addressed in the final report, but will not be addressed here tonight due to just the shortage of time. And in particular, I want to be sure that you know we are focused on, and we will give you our thoughts about short, medium, and long-term steps that you can take to deal with the recommendations that we are presenting to you. We are also going to address in more detail than you will see in this presentation what we think are some of the financing options that you should consider and explore as means to pay for some of the things that we're going to be recommending. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is to ask. So this is the panel. Let me follow my presentation here a little more closely, as opposed to my handwritten notes. So there you can see the panel where we're from. And this is the study area, 273 acres in the southern part of the city called South City. All of you know it well. For purposes of our study, there was a corridor added along South Monroe and South Adams. We call it the Panhandle. And it was added because it represents an area of commercial and other forms of non-residential development that have or potentially have linkage to South City. And there are some specific opportunities that we have identified along that corridor that we're going to discuss with you this evening. The city gave us some project goals. I think you're familiar with them. All of them are essentially addressed in the report that we're going to deliver to you, and I think you'll see all of them reflected in the 10 points that we're going to discuss in detail tonight. We interviewed a great many stakeholders from within the community. Mr. Edwards did a fabulous job of lining up for us a wide range of people from within the South City community who came and talked to us. In some cases, they got on the bus with us and they rode through the study area and got out and talked with us on the ground. So we want to thank not only Chris for the work that he did, but also all the members of the community, all the members of the staff, whether they were from the city or the CRA or other institutions who came and briefed us on various aspects of the situation in South City. With that, I'm going to ask Tom to address a little bit about ULI and the Healthy Places Initiative.
So ULI, I don't know how familiar you're all with it, but ULI is an organization that's been around for 75 years. It has about 35,000 members now worldwide. It was originally created as a think tank, really, by a group of private developers around the country that were concerned in the 1930s about the quality of development beginning to happen in American cities. And so it formed an organization. And we do not lobby at all. Our interest is what we're here today to do, is to encourage people to think about what it means to build really strong and healthy communities. And our focus is really launched several years ago, is explicitly about healthy communities increasingly. If you've ever heard Richard Jackson speak, who was a former director of the CDC and Secretary of Health in California, he came to an epiphany as he was looking at the evidence of increasing juvenile diabetes and other illnesses, that much of what was adding to those illnesses was how we were building our communities, making it harder for people to walk, no sidewalks, and lots of things like that. And so he has really taken it upon himself and works closely with ULI to promote healthy communities. And that's what our mission is. And so by recognizing cities, by working like on advisory panels like this, by publishing books, we talk about what it means to be a thriving community, and particularly how to build a healthy community. Go ahead. Who's next?
You.
No, I know. Is there another slide coming up? Is this challenge? So we see the challenge here as several. But first and foremost, I think what we see is a jigsaw puzzle. In many ways, and I face this as a mayor, is that cities, there's lots of pieces on the table. You have great universities here. You have a city administration that's committed to building its neighborhoods. And the question is how you put those pieces together and where the community will is. When I was mayor, I heard a lot of people say, well, we can't do that because it's the wrong place, or it's always too expensive to do. And what I came to realize is that they're all excuses. The real reason that something doesn't happen is because there's not the community will and focus. And so we believe strongly that you have the resources to change the trajectory of South City. South City has has statistics that are very concerning in terms of child mortality and education levels and the level of public housing there and the level of poverty. And we believe that you can change this trajectory. All of my colleagues are going to talk about that, but there are 2 points I want to make quickly. You need to do that by knowing where you want to go. So you need to have a strategic plan. What I look at when I see South City is a neighborhood that has been developed by a series of transactions without regard to what the overall impact is. So we would encourage you to create a strategic plan that pulls together the various pieces of that puzzle into a beautiful mosaic. The second is how you get there. Where's the institutional capacity to go from where we are today, which is a whole group of various interests involved one way or the other, but not well connected. And we believe that connection, and we'll talk about how that should happen, has to be made. If you don't make and build the institutional capacity to pull together the resources of the universities and the city and the health department and agencies, the federal government and other agencies and private together under a strong focus, you will not succeed in reversing the trends in this neighborhood. And this is, for me, this is the kind of challenge that every city needs to face today, because if you lose the citizens, and particularly in this neighborhood, 60% of the citizens are under 20 years old. And so it is your future you're talking about, of children in this neighborhood that are not connected to the future of Tallahassee. You want to connect them to that future, and by putting together the institutional capacity in a strategic plan, you can do that. And with that, let me introduce Michael Frumkin, who's going to talk about the conditions.
And thank you, Tom. That was really a good introduction. So Tom indicated that we are really concerned about the 2,700 residents of South City. Their existing living conditions, which have existed for a very, very long time, really don't provide much opportunity to make major changes in their lives to improve their quality of living. We have a particular concern around the children and the elderly in South City. There's a very large percentage of children in the community. We understand that the elementary school to which those children go, which is Bond, is not ranked or rated really highly and hasn't been for quite a long time. We were told it's been an F school at some points. It's a D school now. We have some real concerns about that. As you all know, in schools that aren't functioning well, it's very hard for children to succeed. And if very young children start to lose hope in the future, you lose a whole generation. So we really believe that some effort needs to be made to look at the quality of the education received by these students. There are models out there nationally that are evidence-based and that work. The community school movement, which we are doing in Orlando, and we actually have a center that's working with multiple communities around the state and school boards to establish community schools, are an evidence-based practice that's spreading nationally and internationally. Chicago has a couple of hundred community schools. New York City, where this movement started, will have more than 100 over the next couple of years. They've got about 21 now. Cincinnati, there are multiple cities across the country that are developing community schools. And the outcome measures for the children who attend these schools are really kind of phenomenal, and they are all children literally, who come from neighborhoods like South City. So we would suggest, if not community schools, then a comparable model needs to be looked at. We're also concerned about the health care for the residents of South City. We are concerned about access and quality of that care and their ability to afford the health care that they actually need. There are other models out there as well for the children of South City. The Harlem's Children's Zone model, which has really been replicated in Orlando as the Paramore Kids Zone, is a model that links the community to its youth and provides mentoring to help children be successful, both in school and in their activities out of school, and then in their future career activities, whether that be vocational, college, military, whatever their decisions are. And finally, we really believe that for the adults in South City, there needs to be a vehicle so that they can earn living wage jobs. So the combination of providing those living wage jobs, which then implies providing the education and training to acquire those jobs, and the motivation of industry to offer jobs to residents of South City who are qualified, along with the improved education, is absolutely critical. And finally, we also really believe that this isn't a quick process. This is not a 3-year process or a 5-year process, or for that matter, a 10-year process. Changing communities, helping people to improve their lives is almost a forever commitment. The community school we're doing at Evans High School in Orlando, we signed a 25-year commitment with all of the core partners, including the University of Central Florida, that says we're going to be in Pine Hills for 25 years, and that means for longer than that. So those are the major existing conditions and kind of some of the implications that we've drawn from the last couple of days.
Thank you, Mike. I want to underscore one of the points that Tom touched on, and that is this. We were struck from the very beginning about the energy that is bubbling up within the community by the many organizations, community-based, that are working on various aspects of the conditions in South City and in the larger community. We think what needs to happen is somehow that all needs to be marshaled together into one strategic plan so that everyone's working together and everybody's headed in the same direction towards goals with measurable outcomes that the community, broadly based, all buys into. We think, frankly, that requires not only that a planning process be community-based, but that have a high level of commitment by governmental players, starting with you. Not necessarily a plan that you would want to incorporate into your local comprehensive plan. In fact, there's some sentiment on our group that that's probably not the best way to finalize a plan and have it as a basis for future action. Although, as I'm sure you know, there are certain aspects of the kind of plan that you would want to come up with for South City that by law you would have to include in a comprehensive plan. Specifically, I'm thinking of capital improvements. And you'll see quite a few recommendations we're going to give you about capital improvements. Many of them, frankly, came from planning efforts and work by groups in the community. You will find that we borrowed shamelessly from a lot of the work that's already been done within the community. So I would not want anyone to think that our recommendation for a plan that gets everybody going in the same direction is in any way denigrating the work that's been done. Quite frankly, it's the opposite. As there's been a lot of good work done, it needs to be recognized and pulled together and shaped into a coherent whole. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and give you our particular recommendations organized based on the 10 principles that ULI has adopted for its Building Healthy Places initiative. You will see on each of these slides numbers next to specific items that we've got grouped under each of the principles. The numbers are a creature of PowerPoint. They do not reflect any priority ranking on our part. And I think when we present with you with the final report in a couple of months, you will see that they're not necessarily ordered in the way that you're going to see them on these slides. So with that, I'm going to ask Paul to start with the over here. I'm going to ask Paul to start, and I think probably even though we've introduced ourselves once, when each of you gets ready to speak, please just identify yourself again, and remember we're trying to get through this, so a couple of minutes for each one.
Again, my name is Paul Lewis. I'm the Chief Planning Manager with the City of Orlando. And I just want to briefly mention that I was the project manager for about a year-long community planning effort in the Paramore neighborhood of Orlando, which has a lot of this very similar socioeconomic conditions that South City has. And so we utilize the healthy community principles in the development of that plan. And I just wanted to mention that we think that the vocabulary and the concepts that we've utilized here are very, very transferable to other communities. And in fact, we're going to be utilizing those principles not only in the Paramore comprehensive neighborhood plan that we worked on, but also we plan on incorporating them into our comprehensive plan with our next update. So I just want to mention the first item here. I'm going to have to look here because there's a slight it's slightly off over here. So putting people first, and this is kind of this item is. It basically, when we did it in Orlando, we kind of changed the title around it a little bit. We said invest in people, not cars. And so this one's kind of it's kind of an accessibility and interconnectivity type of principle. And essentially what we have here is when we went out and looked and we toured the area, we noticed that there were a lot of missing sidewalks and missing connections throughout the neighborhood. And so the first thing we wanted to mention was we need to improve the pedestrian facilities, and we want to add sidewalks. We need to improve the street crossings in the area, improve some signage and wayfinding through the neighborhood, and particularly we need to look at street lighting. One of the things that we know is that there's some crime issues in the neighborhood, and one of the things that I think we need to do to create a safe place for people is to add sidewalks and add street lighting. That it really is one of the physical things we can do to improve that type of environment. We also talked about creating an east-west pedestrian connection along Putnam, and also we talked about preparing or creating a new greenway trail from Brighton Road over to Florida A&M with a potential additional green spaces along the trail. And we can show you those as we get a little further into it. We talked about providing safe intersections, providing roadway improvements around lighting, and we felt that there needs to be a little bit more community involvement in crime prevention and more police foot patrol in the neighborhood. One of the things we found in Paramore is that it's really one of the things that came out of that process was that the folks really felt that community-oriented policing, particularly we had bike patrols that used to be in the neighborhood that left, and now it's cops going by in vehicles. And what we found is the residents of the neighborhood really didn't know the cops, and the cops didn't know the residents of the neighborhood very well. And so the community really asked for us to change that around and add in some community-oriented policing into the area. Okay, providing safe pedestrian connection through FAMU to Bond. One of the things we noticed was that because most of the kids are going to Bond Elementary, we wanted to provide a safe connection through the neighborhood over to FAMU. And we can show you that on the map as well when we get there. what's the last one is utilizing existing criminal justice departments resources at both the universities for partnership opportunities as well as university-wide volunteer program, and also forming partnerships to create economic opportunities, particularly in commercial areas, opening a career link facility in the neighborhood, primarily utilizing Tallahassee Community College and Tallahassee Economic Workforce Investment Board. The last two are developing programs to empower women in the community, as a lot of the folks that live in the community are single women, and very important. And then also continuing to support the crime committee and create a police substation, at least consider doing oh, we're moving so fast. I'm sorry. So, creating a police substation in South City is an idea that we considered. Okay, now we can go on to the next one. So, the next principle is ensuring equitable access. And one of the things we really focused in on Paramore was that we believe that education is the cornerstone of revitalization for Paramore, all the way from cradle all the way through to career. So that's, I think, a focus we need to hit on in this area as well. Ensure aging in place design philosophy is utilized when the public housing projects are redeveloped in that area. Mike talked about creating a community school or a similar kind of program. Also, we talked about exploring innovative models for reaching the kids, and for us, we use the Paramore Kids Zone. It's been in place since 2006, and it has been really a tremendous success. Our first group of kids are now heading off to college, and they're doing a great job. We have statistics that we could provide on the Paramore Kids Zone. We've had declines in juvenile crime rates and some other positive indicators that we can share with you. Providing educational opportunities to elementary, middle, and high school kids, so that they're comparable to the rest of the county. Again, motivating the family to be engaged throughout the process. That kind of goes along with the community school concept. Community school concept really brings in the entire family and serves the entire family. And then providing availability to books and reading, and providing adult education opportunities such as computer training facilities. One of the things we found in Paramore was that we felt pretty good. We feel pretty good about what's happening to the young kids. We've got a lot of things going on with the Paramore Kids Zone, with a new community school going to be built in 2017, and with UCF and Valencia partnering to work on curriculum as well to help the kids through that. But what we found is that there really needs to be a focus as well on adult education and creating job opportunities and job skills for folks that are adult age. So at that, I will shut up and let somebody else yak.
Thank you, Paul. Chris?
Hello. Mayor, City Manager, and Commissioners, I'm Christopher Jones. I am with RDBG Consulting, a development firm in Jacksonville. I've had tremendous experience in redevelopment areas, particularly like South City. I'm currently working in the CRA in West Palm Beach for the city of Riviera Beach, and South City is very similar to the community I'm working in down there. The two things that I'm going to talk to you about is economic value and healthy food, access to healthy foods. I believe economic empowerment is one of the ways that we can bring this community out of poverty. And I'm not going to touch on all the items for the sake of time. We have other people that have slides, but I'm just going to hit some of the bullet points. Identify, brand, and promote South City. South City has a brand. I think the name can be promoted to help achieve economic empowerment within that community. We also said participation with the CRA to seek opportunities to secure private sector investment. We believe there's a great opportunity for public-private partnership, primarily with FAMU, who is, right next to this community. Make health issues, design, consideration, and review for development. Establish small business incubator. We think this is a way to give the local residents in that community an opportunity to start a business and have a thriving business within their community. promote healthy access. This community has a lot of issues with health, obesity, childhood diabetes. We feel it's important and imperative to be able to give these children an opportunity to have access to quality foods and really change the narrative. So we identified appropriate location and establishments of a farmer's market. We believe that's critical. That's a way for this community and these residents to access healthy and quality foods. Assist commercial development to establish a grocery anchor in the town center. I believe there was a Harvey's in that shopping center, and it's now vacant, and we'd like to see another grocery store fill that void. The community needs that. It needs access to good quality grocery store. Improve how residents within the neighborhood get adequate nutrition. This is just back on the general narrative that we believe that this is a way to promote healthy community and healthy residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wayne.
Okay, well, thank you. My name is Wayne Reed, again, Ram Professional Group at Jacksonville. I get to address two issues as well. The first one is empowering champions to actually carry this forward. And you've already heard probably our key recommendation, and that is for you, the City Commission, to take ownership of forming a task panel, or task group, if you will, that can carry forward this plan. And we think you, Mr. Mayor, and perhaps the president of FAMU should be engaged very deliberately in this process to be able to not just enlist but empower this group to recognize and pull together all the incredible work that's already been done. And there's some incredible folks in the audience that we've spoken to who have done, as David said, some incredible work. Our idea now is let's pull them together. And then secondly, one of our key recommendations is to recognize the FAMU resource that's here, understanding that there's been some issues there and perhaps some, some need to move forward, but they need to be a key player, obviously, in what happens in South City. And we would recommend that we've heard some of their vision already. We've had the chance to speak with those folks, and we think they need to be brought into the process pretty quickly. Engaged and actually empowered to reach out, extend their reach as they go. In addition to that, we want to talk about the health. I mean, there's some healthy baby initiatives that have been done. Clearly, if we can help the health of the youngest ones, they're going to grow up and that's really one of the keys of the ULI Healthy Cities Initiative, is to obviously increase health. So everything that we're trying to say is revolved around that. Let's get people out of their homes. Let's get people walking and things of that nature. Okay, next slide, please. The mix it up, this is where we get to kind of play with the different components, mixed-use development and things of this nature. And we talk about, again, the retail, educational, and recreational activities that in some cases aren't even there. But again, we look at FAMU and we see a lot of resources right literally across the street from where this zone ends. And in fact, there's almost like a wall from our perspective when we drove through there. We'd like to see that go away and see the outreach and the resources that are there, for example, become far more available to the residents. And then we talk about catalytic sites as the next one. Russ is going to show some of those that we've identified on the mapping that he's created. And I think you'll get kind of pumped up by some of the things that came out of there. Once again, we want to talk about FAMU, and I'll say this again only because we see that as such an opportunity. In many ways, a win-win for both them to reach out and provide educational opportunities, and for also the residents to benefit by resources and facilities that might already be there. And we heard a very willing, by the way, ness on their part to be a key player in that. So that's a key recommendation. As far as some other quick things, the complete streets is a concept. You've seen it. You have it here on South Adams, in fact. That's a wonderful concept that focuses on all the users of streets today, not just vehicles. In fact, it tends to de-emphasize vehicles, looking at pedestrians and the bicyclists, people that use mass transit, and making the street available for all folks. In some cases, that might mean a road diet. Maybe we have more asphalt than we need. Maybe we need more on-street parking, for example. Those initiatives are key as you particularly look at South Adams and what's the other one?
South Monroe.
South Monroe. Thank you very much. I was about to say the other one, but that didn't make sense. But key focus on those as well. And Mike has already talked to us about the Florida Quality Health Council. Did I get that right? Something.
QHCs.
Federally qualified.
Federal qualified. The key is health care in the neighborhood. And it was apparent to us that there weren't any of these from what we understood. And so our suggestion is, well, let's go ahead and reach out and find out if we can get some of those, or at least one of those in there. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on that goes back with kind of the complete streets concept is, as we look at those, let's increase the use of amenities to start, or further the idea that you come up with place making, the sense of place initiatives that you folks have already done, including what CRA has already done with murals and public art, for example. And we'll talk later about some funding opportunities for that. And I think that'll do it.
So I'm Mike Frumpkin, the Dean of the College of Health and Public Affairs at UCF. And we're going to talk about making healthy choices easy. The key here that kind of cuts through all of this is how do you make the planned environment one that can also help people to be healthy? And so all of the recommendations that you see up here really link directly to that point. Increased mobility, how do you prioritize sidewalks in South City? And actually, that's an area that we did have some real discussion about. We really appreciate the staff from the city who came and met with us to talk with us about the criteria for placing sidewalks across the city. We do have some concerns that the criteria may very well not advantage neighborhoods like South City in that process, because some of those criteria actually assume things like lots of jobs in the area that people need to go to, and a variety of other things that more developed communities have, but communities like South City don't necessarily have. So one of our recommendations would be to take a look at those criteria in terms of how to prioritize getting some sidewalks into South City, which is really seen by the residents who we spoke with as probably almost the number one major issue that they kept raising with us over the last couple of days. The rest of the points up there, up through number 6, just link back to making the easy, healthy environmental choices. But number 6 we think is really important as well. And that says create a culturally sensitive campaign to engage the community in physical activity and healthy eating and connect back to existing trails and infrastructure. The Winter Park Health Foundation in Orlando has been around for a very long time, but they've started a project in a community very similar to South City called Eatonville, which I'm sure you know of, where they're actually doing this kind of work and being very successful, very high rates of diabetes, heart conditions, all of the kinds of issues that we would probably find in South City as well, high blood pressure, asthma for children. And they've developed a community-based approach to do this. So our suggestion would be, if you're interested, I know they would be more than willing to come and talk about their experiences in Eatonville as a model.
Thank you. Dale.
Good afternoon or good evening. I'm Dale Brill, and I got the 4 most important, clearly, items to cover this afternoon. And actually, I say that with a little bit of jest, but philosophically, I really want to assure the Commission and the audience that the recommendations that you've heard, whether it's the need to integrate a plan, right, and to build on the work that has come before this, the underlying theme and our belief as a committee, though, or as a panel, is that that plan is anchored in a authenticity of the residents and the community that already exists. The paradox of coming from the outside is that you have clarity of what you see, and sometimes that clarity, again, we like to think gives us an opportunity to see opportunity that may not be evident to those that are mired in the challenges that they face, or you as public officials mired in the challenges of how to help. But in addition to saying that vision can be put together, we want to assure you that we believe and firmly encourage you to anchor that in the vision of the people that are there. And the people that are there are going to need to be anchored in what they believe is their own, so that they can own that and that they can envision a future that is also part of theirs. But that genuineness and authenticity has to be there also to attract those that will come from outside. The money that will turn into economic development is going to be money that's going to be spent from people that are attracted to some of the things you'll see in our recommendations that make it in part a destination eventually. It's going to take a while. Don't be discouraged or shake your head and say how impossible it is to envision in less than 12 months that we're talking about magically waving a wand and people will be coming in droves to be part of South City. But shame on us if we don't envision that at some point in the future and what it will take to get there. And again, we want to anchor that in the commitment that folks who live in that residence and around that neighborhood clearly feel. We felt the passion when they talked to us. So the four specific recommendations are, when you're looking at an existing retail corridor and unique residents, give you a thematic idea of that, is that there are some the cuisine that comes out of an authentic African American culture could indeed, and in fact, I'm already one of the foodies that would travel to be part of that. But I want to stop you. Oh, wait a minute. What kind of jobs are we talking about? We're talking about restaurant jobs. That's not going to create the wages that we want to empower people with, ultimately with wealth. Here's why that has legs. Because when we tie that into local source food, when we tie that into not just more kale farmers or more vegetable farmers, but we envision that those farmers also become into the processing business. They become into processing and packaging. That's where the financial margins are. And so you see how you get a foothold in a theme. You get a foothold in something that is authentic, and you envision a future that can bring economic prosperity to a community. And then the other three, again, looking at the natural features, there is quite a bit to be celebrated, whether that is to borrow from the rich heritage that is the FAMU and HBCU and what that means, and whether or not that community relates to that today or not, but there is a connection there that we believe can be both physical and spiritual, if you will, and not to be too dramatic, but it is at least philosophical of, yes, that's part of who we are and who we can be. Create a community driven by, again, that cultural character. That is the bubble up process. Yes, you brought a panel in from the outside, but the work that is being envisioned of bubbling up is what does the community see for itself will be very important as you integrate your various plans. And then lastly, again, the relationship between FAM and South City physically will be those pedestrian corridors. Can I get east-west? Can I cross the street safely? And do I feel that as part of my neighborhood rather than envisioning South City and knowing where the parameters are? I mean, you ask somebody who lives in South City, where is it? They will tell you the streets where the boundaries are. Do they cross from one recreation center to another? Are they welcome from one place to the other? We want to break those barriers down as the idea of South City both is created and destroyed all at the same time.
Thank you, Dale. Mayor, I just want you to know that Russ is getting ready to give you our concluding slides, and then we actually have some graphics we'd like to roll out on the table for you all to see graphically the ideas that the panel has generated for what the future could look like in South City. So if it's in order when he's finished, we'll do that. There are copies on the PowerPoint of the images that we're going to be reviewing with you, so people in the audience will be able to see that as well. So, Russ.
Thank you. My name's Russ Irvin, Lovett Miller. I have two subjects to finalize our discussion with, and one is to energize shared spaces. The other is making it active. They somewhat overlap one another. There's a lot of points and principles underneath these two categories. I don't want to be repetitive, but to energize all the shared spaces is really to develop some begin with developing a centralized park. That will energize certainly the neighboring residents that are there, going to their own park, so to speak. Thinking about maybe that is central to the single-family residence and placing that closer to that community. The Magnolia Trail connection, we understand that is underway or being proposed in the fairly near future. We were very encouraged by that. That's a major connection, major pedestrian connection that could certainly energize different spaces. A little bit dismayed that, as we understand the phasing, one of the last phases was to cross over Adams Street in Monroe and connect to FAMU, and felt like we need to reprioritize that. That is a place people need to walk to and get to and energize. That's a great destination. That last link, we need to make that last link the first link, frankly. Then also thinking about greenway trails. Greenway trails could help certainly connect again the neighborhood east to west back into FAMU. There's an opportunity where we have a drainage way going through east-west. That drainage way could also be utilized as a greenway trail and energize both the neighborhood back into FAMU east-west and connect into some of the commercial activities. The unified retail corridor going north-south, that needs to be energized, and that certainly links both the downtown back to South City, but also links the commercial development of South City to FAMU. It connects the commercial development back to the neighborhood and then the north-south. And the downtown can energize the commercial district located in South City. Enhancing all the public streetscape also energizes the street. Those are public alleys, public ways. By enhancing those, people will want to use those. And we're purposely colliding people together and energizing those zones. There's a beginning of a community garden. I think that's fantastic. That's another energy zone for the neighborhood. It's another destination as well. Let's link that back to the community in a much better, stronger way. We can also host festivals and fairs. We need to make the place for that, and that'll bring attention to the community. That'll also energize the community as well. What do we do with the existing school that's out there? Wesson School is now somewhat dormant. It's still being used, as we understand, but there's a great opportunity there to re-energize this whole area. And it's another node that can be a destination. And let's link that back into the community and get it activated once again. The Super Stop, there's an opportunity there with almost creating kind of a park-like setting. Already the tree canopy is used as a terrific shade area and a place to migrate to. Let's keep that tree canopy and let's celebrate that area. And when the bus stop is designed in that area, keep it as a park and park-like. It's almost iconic, certainly with that area. And then the community churches, they've become, from our understanding, we've met with some of the pastors, and our understanding is that they're a lot of the heart and soul of the residents there. And let's keep those linked in and energized and make it safe, to go to evening services and make it walkable and accessible to the entire community and energize those spaces as well.
Mayor, before we go on, let me just tell you, I think we're going to run a little longer than 5:30. I want to be sure that doesn't interfere with anything that you all already have on your schedule.
Well, good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
I'll speed up through these as well. Some of these are again repetitive to making it active in shared spaces, but improving the, I guess, basic underlying principle here is just improving all the connections and making it multimodal. primarily walking and biking. And those connections then automatically make everything active. And it promotes activity just in general. If you're enjoying your travel, your trip, you're going to walk before you will then get into a car. You're going to promote that, and that automatically begins to speak to a healthy place. And the more promoting connectivity within this community and connectivity in this area, the more active it's going to be. I don't need to go down, I don't think, each one of these. We've touched on each one of those, and we'll number 8, we'll actually have it mapped out, maybe some of the catalytic projects that could get things rolling in the right direction. Financing options, we've listed those here. We'll expound upon those in the final report. Certainly there are plenty of financial options available, and so we won't dwell on that. I think what we'll go to next, and I'm going to try to roll this out in front of you so you'll have a much closer look. This is good. Let's go with this. Yeah.
This is why we love architects, right? They can take all these ideas and make a pretty picture of it, right?
Well, please excuse the cartoon sketches here, but as everyone was talking and a lot of the discussions that were going on, and we started flowing, and the ideas started to spill from mind to paper here, if you will. And I think the underlying concept is really that connection with FAMU. We have FAMU all the way to the west end of our property that we're looking at the end of the project. All the way to the east end, we have single-family homes. And in the middle is commercial. And how can we connect all of those neighborhoods together and make the commercial really the hub? That is the gathering point for the whole community. And it's central to the college, the university. It's central to all the residents. And it needs to be just woven together. And right now they're bifurcated. We have major roadway networks in the form of Adams Street and certainly Monroe Street that really are barriers for the residents to try to cross and get over to the university. And likewise for the university to cross over and come into the neighborhood. We'd like to encourage a plan that really makes that strong connection. And with that, we could see the university migrating, if you will, in some form or fashion into the neighborhood. And whether that's students that live into the neighborhood and they can walk very easily to class and to the campus, or even if FAMU even put something structural into the neighborhood, that linkage, we think, is vital. And that linkage will kind of cross-pollinate the neighborhood into the university, and the two will collide in the middle at commercial nodes. It also then will create a new vibrance to the commercial area. The commercial area, we're calling it the town center. Think of it as the gathering spot for everybody. And with that, you can see on the map, on the north end is Magnolia Drive, and we feel Magnolia needs one of the strongest connections right into FAMU. What that'll take is major intersection improvements that are traffic calming principles as you cross over Adams and over Monroe. If those can be safe crossings, our kids from the neighborhood could cross over. And frankly, Magnolia, if you were to project that all the way east-west through with a pedestrian way, it would connect them to Bond. and there could be a very safe travel directly to Bond. We would have to have some stipulations or some agreement with the university, but the thought is if we could get a pedestrian crossing across the campus, we're to Bond. And thought that was a major catalyst that will get the two communities or all the community feathered together. And then the extension of the Magnolia Trailway then continues back into the neighborhood. The second major link we saw was Putnam. Putnam could become kind of the center spine of the neighborhood. That central spine could then again cross into the town center. The town center then could be utilized by the neighborhood. And then again, it could cross over into the university. And likewise, then the students could come across through that street and sidewalk network and again engage the town center. I guess as we understand it, when the grocery store was there, students would walk over to the grocery store, get their food, and go back to their dorms. And now that's not present. Then the last east-west major connector we saw was the ability to possibly create that greenway. And there's a greenway trail considered as it could go along the canal that is there. And that, too, could connect east-west all the way across into the university and back. And so we end up with three major connection points that we would like to suggest: traffic calming and safe intersections and safe crossings going east-west across Monroe and Adams, and glue those two together. With that, to the south, we recognize that there is the existing transit station that could be enhanced, will be enhanced as we understand it. The existing school that is not being utilized to its full extent at the moment. And that corridor along South Meridian almost becomes the educational corridor. It's a north-south link. If we could tie that educational corridor back to the north and back into these east-west corridors, the whole community now has great pedestrian access, great connection to that school, whatever we want to repurpose it to or utilize it for, as well as connection to the transit stop. Also along that corridor is the beginning of the community garden. Saw that as a great start, certainly for healthy food. Again, along Texas, if we could bring that, enhance the pedestrian connection there as well, that could become expanded upon and maybe becomes the farmers market in that zone for the neighborhood and the community there. So we have some major connections and nodes that along that south end. As we come deeper into the neighborhood, certainly along Putnam, kind of central is the church, which is has been, I guess, a gathering spot and somewhat of an identity. And in some ways, a lot of activity has happened at that church. But continue on, and another thought is to then create a great neighborhood park space. That's the end of the dumbbell, if you will. So on one end of Putnam would be a new park space that would be primarily geared towards the residential. On the other end is FAMU, and that's the two ends of the dumbbell right down a center spine. That would activate all of Putnam Drive, really, on both sides of the street. And we could have the quietness of the neighborhood and the residents to the west. And as you transition towards the university, the intensity steps up and the density may step up as well. And certainly the biggest energized zone then becomes the town center, the commercial district. Those were some of the concepts, and again, this was done very, very quickly in a charrette fashion. Kind of just a spill on paper. But those are some of the underlying development ideas and redevelopment ideas that could energize the whole community and would promote future healthy growth. the middle ground, the middle of the community that would all fill in as needed. Whatever it becomes, but at least we've set up the bones and the framework for a healthy community that others in the future can plug into. With that in mind, we created somewhat of a catalyst map, if you will. And we numbered them, and again, this is in no certain order, but there's 8 features here that we think are a great catalyst to get this redevelopment and re-energize this neighborhood. And one of those we touched on, and certainly is Magnolia Drive and that connection east-west to the center spine of Putnam. We think is crucial. 3, create that Greenway Trail, east-west trail as well. 4, if we can, create a Central Park at the end of the dumbbell to the end of Putnam as a dead-end location. 5 is the community gardens have already been started. Let's expound upon those. That's already a destination. 6, what we do with Wesson School, re-energize it, make it a destination. 7, the town center will become much more festive and much more active, particularly with all these links to it. And 8 was the transit hub and making that, actually that whole link down to the transit hub, the north-south link, kind of that educational corridor, if you will, down South Meridian, begin to develop that. So those are 7 initial steps that really will change, make some, get things going, get things moving in the right direction. Again, this was a quick spill. We didn't get down into the weeds on too much, but this is kind of an overarching high-level look at the community.
Thanks, Russ.
Sure.
We wanted to do this because we thought it was important to give you all some ideas to think about, to show what is possible to imagine in South City. And this is just a result of a very short period of thought by this very small group. There's no telling how many other ideas you might be able to generate in the kind of community-based planning process we were talking about. Before we take your questions, I'd like to say one more thing. We realize that a number of the ideas that we've identified and we've listed are things you're already doing or committed to do. We're aware of that. We're mentioning them again because we think they're important for addressing conditions in South City. Secondly, we realize that there are challenges with a number of the ideas that we've brought you. For example, absent decision makers like the Department of Transportation. That was identified for us. We're aware of that challenge. There are other challenges. Quite frankly, we do not take lightly our recommendation about the criteria for sidewalks. We understand the sensitivity of that issue. But quite honestly, we think it's important that there be some very early steps identified that can be achieved and can be confidence builders. And quite frankly, one of the ones that received most discussion in our group was sidewalks. And so that's one of the reasons why we've brought that idea to you. Ultimately, that'll be a decision to be made by the community and by you. But we came away from our discussions and our meetings with stakeholders and in the community believing that there's a real, genuine, deep interest in that particular proposal. So with that, Mayor, we'd like to take your questions. I have some thank yous I'd like to do at the end, but obviously we want to give you a chance to ask whatever questions that you and the commissioners have.
Great.
Or anyone else.
Sure. We'll make the rounds around the table. I just want to first say, David, and to each of you, again, a sincere and heartfelt thank you for taking of your time and coming in, and you were right to identify that we do have a number of community advocates and a lot of momentum that is underway, and I think that's an excellent thing. And what you all have, I should say, and this isn't my saying, you all know it well, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. And so it helps to have folks who come from outside with a fresh look, almost unexposed in many ways to the issues and the conditions, and in a matter of 2 days really validate a lot of what many of us already know about the area. But we have had as a community probably more conversation between this city council, this city commission in its current form, with this particular area than I have experienced in 12 years on the city commission. And I think that's a good thing because it suggests to me that we may be reaching a point beyond conversation to real decision-making and action. And that's what I hope, building from this as our community continues to reckon with these recommendations, and over the next, I believe you said, David, 4 to 6 weeks, get a complete report, we'll be able to take some more affirmative actions on. So I just want to, before we get into our questions, extend a real heartfelt thank you on behalf of our community for your work.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been an honor to do this, and it's 6 to 8.
6 to 8. I knew that. I just thought I would.
You're trying to rush
shave it off by a couple
that.
of weeks.
Yeah. May I make one comment?
Please, Madam Manager.
Did you introduce Carolyn Clark?
I did not. And I don't know where she's gone off to, but I'm going to introduce some of the supporting cast here before we're done.
Right. Commissioner Ziffer?
Sure. Just to echo the mayor's thanks. Clearly, some of these things that we have thought of, but the connectivity to FAMU is significant. That, quite frankly, I don't think some of us may have, but we haven't discussed it because we have thought of South City as an island, I think, which is probably the wrong thing to look at because it's not an island. We've always considered it part of the entire city, but actually the connectivity to FAMU makes a great deal of sense, and creating those east-west corridors, this whole town center concept is something that I had not thought of or heard of, so I appreciate you on that. The school concept intrigues me because I'd had previous conversations with some folks about what the success of Evans was in Central Florida. And it seems to me that may be one of those things where, because we tend to think of infrastructure, we tend to think of concrete and, lights and things like that. And that's less of infrastructure and that's more of human capital, it would seem to me. So is that one of those like low-hanging fruit that you could attack first?
Yeah, it absolutely is. We've actually done planning grants with Escambia and Brevard and Pasco, and we're working with Jacksonville and Tampa to develop community schools. We're also developing more in Orange County. We'd love to work with you here to do the same thing. It's truly amazing when you see the impact these have on the children and their families over time. So if you're interested, just let us know and we'll be glad to do that.
Are the ones that you've done, are those typically through the school system or are those connected with the city, county? How?
Interesting. Most of them are with the school system. They all involve a major university as a core partner, a healthcare provider, which is usually a federally qualified healthcare center, a major nonprofit. Usually it's been the Children's Home Society, and there is a major Children's Home Society branch here in Tallahassee. And clearly the school district. In some communities, the city is coming to the table and wants to participate in terms of things like economic development, and we're starting to see that happen more frequently. So, yeah.
So I think I had heard that there were going to be several schools around the state that were going to somehow have the opportunity to be part of this, and there was one more opportunity. Did I understand that correctly? Or?
Well, there's not necessarily one more. We have a Center for Community Schools and Child Welfare Innovation that the legislature funded. So we've given out 3 planning grants this year on a match basis to those 3 school districts I mentioned. But we do technical assistance with any school district across the state that wants to develop a community school. And hopefully we'll have some more planning grants even to give out next year, depending on what happens with the legislature over the next few weeks. So our commitment is to try to expand this concept across the state. We'd love to work with you in Tallahassee around that.
That's clearly one that I would suggest that we could try to pursue with our school district because, as I said, it is low-hanging fruit. It's not bricks and mortar, and it's something we could probably move on fairly quickly.
May I jump in and just underline that the institutional capacity of how you bring you guys, the school district, the hospitals, the universities, so everybody's speaking one language. That's really the challenge you have.
But it seems to me, though, by doing that, if you can accomplish that under the umbrella of the school, then you have all your players already at the table together for a lot of these other things that we're talking about. And that seems to me, like everything else we do, the hardest part is getting truly everybody to come out of their silos and work together. And it seems like under that umbrella, you're able to do that.
That's why we would suggest this task force that brings people together at a very high level, so that the sidewalks in the school are all happen simultaneously rather than some are happening and some are not.
Yeah, and it's amazing, though. You're absolutely right in terms of what happens once people come around together around this kind of concept, because what it also does is once the word gets out that it's happening, lots of other groups want to come around the table, and lots of other resources start to appear from foundations, from a variety of different sources. To do a community school costs somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 a year for the basic staffing, and the rest of the resources are really resources already being spent by community agencies, but just put together in a different way and wrapped around the children in the school and the parents and relatives of the children in the school. So you get an enormous return on investment for very little upfront dollars.
Just so for everyone's knowledge, from a grading standpoint, as I recall, Evans went from an F school to a B school?
Actually, a double F school at one point to a B school, yeah.
Fairly short period of time, as I recall.
We've been working with them about 5 years.
Great.
I would just encourage you, if you've not been to Orlando to see Evans, that you do so. I have seen it. It is absolutely extraordinary. It really is. And, you know, Mike is the person in Florida that you go see if you want to get one of these going.
Right. I can't remember which one of you mentioned the need for sort of access to not hospitals, but medical facilities, parks. So as you went through that, I thought, you know, in my own head was naming the ones that at least I know and would consider in proximity to the area. I'm wondering, is there data that says that it's got to be but so close for a community to feel like it is theirs? I mean, for instance, Bond, a federally qualified institution right up the street, in my opinion, not so terribly far, maybe within a mile and a half, 2 miles.
Mile and a half.
Mile and a half. How close do you have to be, or is this just a matter of making people aware of what's available to them?
It's not so much physical distance. It's more almost cultural difference or distance. What we're finding in both Pine Hills and Paramore is that because people haven't had access to health care for so long, they don't know how to access it. And so you could have a clinic right around the corner, but if you don't see it as a place you're going to go, you kind of walk by it every day. We embed the clinics in the schools, and what we're seeing with that is that with an education campaign similar to the one we proposed, you can actually get the students in, you can then get their parents in, and the parents can work, because when the student becomes ill or they don't have to worry about taking them to an emergency room and being off the job or potentially being fired because they're not where they need to be. So we think there are ways to do it. Again, it's not an overnight phenomenon, but it's doable.
So in the Orlando example that you worked on, Mike, access to health care inside, I'm obviously imagining Harlem's Children's Zone and the work Jeffrey Canada has done in the wraparound system, which means you don't necessarily have to have a kid in the school. Anyone who's in the neighborhood can access the resources.
Absolutely. So the schools are open from very early in the morning to late at night, usually 6 days a week. There's a parent resource room where you can sign up for benefits, where you can look at potential jobs that are available, talk about issues that affect people in the community. There are lots of adults. The parents then spend a lot of time in the school volunteering, doing a variety of things because they start to feel more comfortable in being in that environment, and then the children see that their parents are interested. So now you're starting to build those kinds of relationships. So I'd love for you to come to Evans. I'd love for you to see some of the work that they've done in New York City, up in Washington Heights. You can walk into that school, any of those schools, and in 5 minutes tell this is something very different than what you're used to in a school. Very cool.
Commissioner Maddox.
I'm
sorry, I missed you. Commissioner Miller.
Well, the couple of things that I wanted to ask you about. First of all, I understand your parks concept, and I thought that was great. I was wondering if you were aware, because it's a little bit out of your study zone, right across the street is the pond area where the Blueprint project is to expand that into a big park. So I want to know you're thinking about that. And the other thing I wanted you to talk a little bit more about, I know that I'd heard one of you, Paul, I think, express, it was either Paul or Wayne, express the fact that the neighbors had mentioned that the neighborhood just didn't feel safe, because we love trees in Tallahassee, but there's overkill essentially, and there's so much vegetation there that people are just are not comfortable. And then in addition, back to the movement discussion, that informs on health decisions in the fact that people are, I had a doctor tell me recently that her patient was afraid to go out of the house because, I mean, she says get out of the house and walk, and yet the patient won't go out of the house because she is afraid. And so I wanted to hear more about what you think we ought to do to address that over lush vegetation. So the park question and the over lush vegetation question.
Let me address the park question, if I may. We are aware of the opportunity there at the Blueprint project across the street. Quite honestly, we debated whether to include that on the map, and we chose not to do so, primarily because it's technically outside the study area. In the case of Wesson, and we knew that you all were talking about doing something here. We knew there was something in motion. In the case of Wesson, it's outside of that study area as well. It's across the street. We felt, quite honestly, we needed to get that on your radar screen. We needed to emphasize the opportunity that we think is there. There's any number of things that you could imagine for Wesson. And so we went out of we stepped over the line to talk about Wesson, and we consciously chose not to do it, but we're aware of the opportunity at the park.
And you still feel that the park is an important addition? Okay.
We do. I think. Well, Russ, it's your idea. So, but I think the idea, the primary idea for putting that dumbbell park, what'd you call that? I don't think that'll be the official name for it. But the idea there is that it's centrally located and would serve most of the residents in that area, and it would also kind of create those terminus points for the neighborhood.
Yeah, and see that as a quieter park where it's located now, that you can push a baby in a stroller and be very comfortable getting there, very close proximity to all the single family.
And I think, yes, I was the one, I think, in one of our conversations that talked about the overly beautiful but overly lush green in the neighborhood. That was one of the things that I noticed as we were driving through. I'm sitting going, I wouldn't necessarily feel safe walking through the neighborhood and not being able to see across a yard and know what's around a corner. It's basic park planning, really, if you think about it, and street planning in order to increase safety. And there's your planning staff knows about crime prevention through environmental design. It's creating defensible space. It's creating that feeling of safety across space. So if you add the sidewalks, if you trim some of that vegetation back so that people feel comfortable, that will help with not only safety and hopefully with crime, but also that perception of safety. So I think that's a really critical thing to think about. And that may be through code enforcement. It may be through just a community project, that the entire community can embrace. So there's different ways to approach it.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. Do you have a chance?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Maddox and then Madam Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great. I just love that we're dreaming, right? And there's a lot that is a heavy lift here. Dealing with state roads, the Department of Transportation, the transportation ends of this are going to be immensely expensive and difficult to do, and it'd take a long time because it'd have to get in our 5-year plan unless we did a state direct appropriation, which would be subject to veto. So there's some of these things that we can start the process on, but it won't happen for a long time. But then there's others that we can do right away, right? The fact that Wesson School is sitting there and not being used at all. I have an adopted family member that has lived on Brighton, Wallace, and Texas. So I started with him when he was 6, and he's now in his 30s. So I've kind of seen that area over time. There's tremendous amount of potential. And I think what you said, Mr. Powell, about absent decision makers, we need to see if we can spur the school district into action here, and perhaps some of this will do that. We also need to bring the county to the table. Right. The county, who's primarily tasked with funding health initiatives, needs to come to the table. And the concept of using the schools for health clinics is outstanding. I've seen it happen all over the country. It helps not only the children there, but the neighborhood folks, but also the school employees.
Absolutely.
And the one governmental entity that touches people more in this area, or any really, but especially this area, are the schools. So, I mean, they touch students, parents, employees, crossing guards. I mean, the schools are the governmental entity that's at the tip of the spear. So I'm excited about the next step for this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner, I'm sorry, Madam Manager, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
I'm just wondering about the thinking related to, I didn't hear any specific recommendations related to housing or infill development or anything like that. Yeah. Were there just, these are higher priorities, or was that considered, or where did it fit?
I think for me personally, what jumped out at me is that this has, I think, has become a place that has almost a third, maybe almost half of your subsidized housing in the city is located in this neighborhood. It's probably illegal. The federal government potentially could sue you over that because you're not allowed to concentrate public housing and Section 8 certificates in one census tract. And so I would suggest that you might want to pay attention to that, okay? And because the concentration that we've heard about is 1/3 of your community-based public housing is located in this neighborhood, and over 1/3 of your vouchers are located in this neighborhood, probably in the apartments that are there. That is not healthy. And that has happened over time because people have not paid attention. So to make a healthy community, you're going to have a mixed income community. And part of how you make that happen depends on your housing strategy. And that is why we have sort of underlined the idea of a strategic vision in an institution, because what you have is a series of transactions happening that nobody is paying attention to incrementally that have created an unhealthy condition in your housing. And you need to begin to focus on that. And in doing that, there are opportunities to build other housing, and we have recommendations in that. And we think the opportunities are to think about home ownership, and not because you have probably 90% of the houses in that area now are probably rental. And home ownership is important, and how you shape home ownership so you can get moderate income people into housing is a very important piece of the conversation. And how you use your community development block grant or other funding sources you have to do deferred second mortgages and other ways are all part of a housing strategy that has to fall under a whole strategic vision for this area. But what is so clear about this for us, I think, is the incremental nature of how decisions are made. And one that, Mr. Chairman, one that is really clear also is what we believe is the town center, which it represents a huge opportunity. You have a big vacant piece of property in the shopping center. And what you put in there and the quality that you insist on, this is a choice. There's a disease in the water in many cities, I think, and it's called the it'll do disease. And you have a choice on that shopping center. You can do an it'll do shopping center that will sort of be marginally okay and serve a population, or you can decide that we're going to do something that is going to become a driver for the whole city. We did this in Pittsburgh, in a neighborhood not dissimilar to South City. We worked with a private developer, and we got Whole Foods to locate in this neighborhood. First Whole Foods in Pittsburgh. Highest, the Rookie of the Year store in the Whole Foods chain, but more importantly, the highest percentage of food stamps of any store in the country were being spent in this store, which says poor people want to eat well, given the opportunity. So you need to decide whether you're going to dream, raise your game, or do it'll do. And I'd like to think we're going to come back here in 5 years and you've made a decision to dream rather than it'll do.
Let me follow, if I may. Let me follow up from Tom on the housing question. We did take the bus tour with Ms. Williams, and she discussed with us and explained the activities they have underway with the housing developer out of New Jersey, the grant applications they've got with Florida Housing Finance Corporation, the phasing, the schedule. We are well aware of that. We do address that in our recommendations. We thought that was a very positive thing, and we think the city ought to help do whatever can be done to make that happen.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards.
Okay. I think this is great, and I before we go any further, I want to thank the folk who have been working on this and that provided you all with a lot of the information that you used. Bill and Michelle Hartson, Courtney Atkins, Torio Osborne, the Orange Avenue Tenants Associations, Marie Bryant, and to thank them for all that they have done to get us this far and to bring attention to these very issues. So I want to make sure that doesn't go unsaid. And there are many other partners that have been a part of that. Chris Edwards, our business advocate for the city. Yes. But I'm getting to that because I think that that this has got to be even broader than what you all have presented here. I never heard FSU mention TCC, our Chamber of Commerce. All of those partners are going to have to come to the table if this is to be realized. All of us are going to have to be at the table singing from the same hymnal. Our chamber, in terms of economic development, the universities, I think I heard somebody say yesterday in your session that they have an obligation to be involved in the community. And so not only FAMU, but FSU, TCC as well, all of those resources are going to have to be brought to bear to address the very long-standing issues that exist in this area. Now, the one thing that I didn't hear you all address, and maybe you can talk about it, is some of the because a lot of this area has been identified as being in a floodplain. And so did you all address how we deal with the water and stormwater issues in the area and to make it attractive to development from that perspective? Because that's a big barrier. That huge ditch that runs through there is a major barrier to commercial and economic development in the area.
I'm going to ask Paul to speak to that, although all of us can. We got a lot of help from your staff on that. But before we do that, I want you to know that we do identify some very specific things that we believe FAMU, FSU, TCC, other institutions in the community need to be involved in as a part of this overall effort.
Okay. I'm not sure. Did you want to take that one?
Please do.
If I can. Well, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge your public works staff, specifically Karen and Jody and Casey met with us. And what they explained is that you folks have already spent $20 million addressing your stormwater issues from way back when. You have a little bit more to do, including the ditch, and we couldn't find a name for it. The ditch. Okay, so
we thought about Bob.
With a D.
Right.
I think you ought to have a contest to name it.
That's right. Name the ditch.
That's right. Name that ditch.
But what we learned is that the plans that are already in place are to pipe that ditch.
Yes.
So basically, the ditch goes away, and you've got a wonderful resource available to you to put the greenway and the linear park concept upon. Now, the second thing we learned is that about 30% of this study area is currently in the 100-year floodplain. That's expected to change because when the FEMA maps were last done, none of the $20 million of construction had been taken into account. So now that's a hope, and I think it's more than just a feeble hope. I think that's a strong probability that in fact the floodplain zone will shrink. But it was clarified. Remember what FEMA does. I mean, it's a flood insurance program, so they're not necessarily setting a boundary. That's really your job, is to establish, well, what are we going to do within, let's say, a 100 or 500-year flood zone? And in this particular case, from what we learned, there really is not an impediment. It's currently in place, at least as far as the horizontal construction that will need to take place as far as infrastructure.
Right.
Now, it'll get better. I mean, again, because you folks are regulated by the feds just as everybody else is, to where, okay, right now you would have to build higher if you're within that, quote, yellow zone, as David kept calling it, then you will once that shrinks. The sad news, though, is that we learned that could take quite some time. It's about a year and a half into the process. It could take a couple more years for those to be finalized. And we felt frustrated by that, as I'm sure a lot of you do, and felt like, well, we need to accelerate that, because if that's holding up decisions, we just need to be able to go forward and not have that as an obstacle, let's say, to what we're going to do in the area.
One other question, Mr. Mayor.
If I could just add to what Wayne said. Dr. Jumonville and Growth Management and Gabe Menendez from Public Works came today and addressed a number of things. They were particularly helpful in helping us get our minds around the floodplain issue. I think we came away from that conversation believing that everything that can be done is being done. The only thing I would add is we also came away with a recognition, which I know all of you share, that at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to be an economic issue. Because in order for development to proceed in an area that does have floodplain characteristics, I mean, there are just things that the code requires, and rightfully so, that add to the cost.
That's right. The other question that I have, and it's a question that we have kind of just started to have to deal with here in Tallahassee, and it's sort of involved in the issue of gentrification, but it's not gentrification. But as you all know, as you go in and you start making these infrastructure improvements, it drives up the property value. You drive up the property value, you increase the property taxes. Have you all addressed that issue in terms of the indigenous population and making sure that those factors don't drive them out of the very area that you're trying to rescue?
This, Paul and I can probably talk about that a little bit. This is a major issue for us in Paramore. The university is building a downtown campus in relation to a project called Creative Village. And we actually wanted to be the premier example of how you can partner a university with a low-income, high-need community to benefit both on a very long-term basis. And so one of the key components, and we're very concerned about gentrification too, so one of the key components is mixed income housing. Okay. And then that point about social enterprise and the ability to open up opportunities for local residents to get either education or a combination of education, training, and then employment that actually pays them a wage where they have choices. So they can then choose to stay in the community or they can choose to move outside of it, but they're not thrown out of it. And if they want to stay in the community, they have that option. That's what we're trying to work toward. And Paul actually was key in developing that plan. So.
Well, and I was going to say that obviously you'll need to work with your housing authority and with your housing department. I'm not sure if you have a housing department per se, but in Paramore, in the Paramore plan that we worked on, that was definitely, and throughout the whole planning process, the gentrification issue was really front and center throughout, and it really is. So we combat it through education, as Mike said. We deal with it through the job opportunity side, and also through a comprehensive housing strategy that works on, just to give you guys an idea, and in Paramore, the city of Orlando probably owns 350 or 400 empty lots. Okay, so we own a lot of property in there that we will be going in and building sustainable single-family homes and working on a home ownership program as we proceed. One of the plan recommendations was build 20 sustainable single-family homes per year for the next 20 years. That's one of our plans. Now, whether we'll get there, I don't know, but that's one of the goals. And I would also say that I think the city of Tallahassee also has an inclusionary zoning requirement, and so that's another way to look at this when you start thinking about redevelopment opportunities for mixed use, mixed income properties along the Monroe Street or Adams Street corridors in those areas, and then maybe creating that connection over to Florida A&M. Is that in those areas, that's where you might want to focus some of those inclusionary units when you look at development projects in there. So okay. I think that's how you have to do it. There's no magic formula for gentrification. It's working on all those things.
I think what Paul outlined on the rental side is that we in Pittsburgh, and I don't know your laws here, worked to provide permanent subsidized housing in neighborhoods that were gentrifying. But we also, and I was involved in drafting this, I was in the legislature, is passed the law for people that owned houses that in neighborhoods that were gentrifying. So these are older people typically, or moderate income people where it was not a desirable place to live, and then it becomes. We passed a state law that permits the city to certify an area that freezes people's property tax at a base.
Land trust? Is that?
At a base. So you pay the same property taxes for a base prior to the gentrification when values have started to go up for the rest of your life as long as you live in that property. Your heirs do not need to pay it back. It's forgiven.
Okay. But it doesn't pass on to the heirs.
No, then the property taxes go to the heir once the house is sold.
Right.
Or transferred in one way. And so it might be something that you want to tackle because it has worked really effectively for us in historic district neighborhoods where the values have gone from $30,000 to $300,000
right.
in the an elderly person. So it's defined by both age and income. Okay, and so within those areas certified by the city, age and income, you can freeze your property taxes.
And there are some other methods like land trusts that can be considered as well.
Like you need to go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, right. It's Pennsylvania, and I'm happy to. I mean, if you want to share, I could share information with your city manager if you want to do that.
No.
I think here that probably would
constitutionally that will not allow you to be taxed out.
To be what?
Taxed out. Your property taxes can only increase at very small incremental levels. Constitutional.
We don't have that.
Yeah, we do.
So literally, you get a sticker shock in a neighborhood like that, right?
Mm-hmm. We used to have those, and then we had some reforms statewide.
That's right. Other questions, commissioners? The only other point that you all made I wanted to give voice to was this idea of sort of the branding of South City. I think through the media and otherwise, we have allowed the impression, and when you say it, you don't get a warm and fuzzy feeling necessarily. People aren't associating the best of what's happening in this community when you say the name. It's almost always connected to some sort of, unfortunate or deprived piece. And the truth is that throughout the area there are still too many aspects of inequality, whether it's health or income or education, so on and so forth. But I do think it matters what you say about yourself. Sure. And in many ways it becomes self-fulfilling. Right. And you got to give people a reason. One, if you're talking about investing in and buying a home, you need to feel good about where it is you live. But also, as Commissioner Richardson has pointed out so much, the built environment needs to complement that belief system. And then some of the social conditions also have to complement that belief system. But I do think that there's something to what it is we say about a place. I think Frenchtown is probably one demonstrated example of where it had a Renaissance period. Its genesis was a Renaissance. And then it had a depressed period, wage-wise and flight and real joblessness and so on. And now we're back to a place where I think it's experiencing, again, a renaissance. Again, it's been a little slow moving, but nonetheless, it's beginning to turn that corner. And so the name is no longer associated necessarily with or automatically with the most depressed of what's happening in our community. And so I think there's a nugget in there for all of us, those of us at the policymaking level and the media, but also for the community. That part of it is owning a brand, and a brand that suggests that what's happening here is good and reviving and transitioning and aspirational. And even if it's not all the way 100% true today, that the life that we're giving to it will make it so. And I certainly make that commitment, but I think what we're trying to do here is stimulate real change to complement that impression.
Yeah. Mayor, I think that Mr. Lewis can
I just want to say
branding question.
The city of Orlando has had a great deal of success with our Main Street program. And I don't know if you are very familiar with we have about 6 or 7 Main Street corridors in the city of Orlando where where they've really done a great job of branding and marketing the local businesses in those areas and really creating an identity for what we're calling the urban villages within the city. And I would encourage you. I think you already have a CRA in place. They can take on some of those, and they may already be doing those type of functions. But I would recommend, or we would recommend, I think, exploring. If you don't want to establish a Main Street per se, you can certainly use the concepts that Main Street provides, and they're easily. Not easily, takes work, but they are. You can repeat them throughout the country. We've done it 6 or 7 times in Orlando, so it works.
Right. Mr. Mayor, just
Commissioner
one thing: that gun violence. I know that y'all aren't dealing with that, and we have some in our audience that have. And in a lot of people's minds, gun violence is synonymous with the South Side, but that's not the case. I mean, there is gun violence, and it exists there. But as we've been meeting today, there was a shooting in Killearn, off Halstead Boulevard. Two people got in an argument by mailboxes, and one shot the other. So it knows no barriers, gun violence. So that I think your point was well taken.
Good point. Well, I want to thank y'all again for y'all have been more than generous with your time over these past several days, and you can tell this is an engaged group, and that there's a lot of commitment coming from this level. As an update to my colleagues, you all authorized the last table meeting that we had to invite all those partners that we mentioned, from the business community to the educational and so on and so forth. We have done some outreach again. Commissioner Richardson has been tagged as lead on that to bring that group again together. And my hope is, Commissioner Richardson, under your leadership, we can pull together an agenda there that helps every partner see where they fit in. And I think there were elements of today's conversation that, if well illustrated, will make very clear the picture that we all have a role to play in moving this along. This is not a city problem exclusively, a county or a school board or business problem exclusively. It's all ours. Commissioner Ziffer?
If I could suggest, and it's 2 parts. The first is so that we avoid sunshine issues. And I'm going to be in Orlando a week from Friday. I know you are, but I think we could probably do it at different times so we don't run into that issue. I certainly want to go on a tour, but if I could suggest, and Commissioner Richard, this is in no way to overstep your position of this, but if the mayor could reach out to our superintendent or the head of the school board to go ahead and push this discussion quickly. It seems to me that this is an extremely important moment, and there's a real opportunity here. I don't know how quickly this can happen, but this is the end of this school year, and we need help as quickly as we possibly can. So perhaps, if it's okay with the rest of the commission, that the mayor could reach out and start those conversations, and I'll be in touch when I'm in Orlando next week.
That's great, and we can get the right people together to meet with you when you're there.
Yeah, and I did reach out to the superintendent as a follow-up to last 2 weeks ago, our meeting, and he indicated, one, he'd be at the meeting, and two, whatever he could do to help. I think we ought to crystallize a little bit more clearly. So your charge is well placed. Just one last question, and then we've held y'all hostage long enough. The jobs piece, which is a point not lost on any of us. It's a key to reducing recidivism where it appears. It's a key to keeping people out of making desperate positions about their housing and food and finance, so on and so forth. I'm expecting that maybe within this report there may be some recommendation around creative solutions there, because in large part is driven by the private sector for sure. But in areas where they have not yet gone, how do you stimulate that in such a way that you create opportunity for people who live in an area to work in close proximity to where they live?
I think Tom Murphy can address that.
I think there's several layers to this, but one is that your community is receiving through a workforce investment board significant money to help with job training, and we call it Career Link. And so at one level, we believe within a church, or I would say basement, but you don't have basements, but within one of the maybe existing buildings, I would reach out and get at least a little office, a computer that connects into, I'm sure your workforce investment board somewhere has list of opportunities. The other is training, of the training opportunities available through the Workforce Investment Board. The other is we would engage very directly with businesses that are looking for employment about the types of people they need and the jobs and then connect it. And let me give you one example. We recruited in a poor neighborhood, Home Depot, to come in. There was no urban Home Depots at the time, and this was 5 miles from the nearest interstate. And we worked with Home Depot when they came, and they were going to hire about 250 people. And so we did the initial recruitment, built a system with them. 80% of the people they hired walked to work. Came from the immediate neighborhood, including the manager of the store, who for the first time in his life, a young man had no retail experience, became the manager of that Home Depot store. So there's no magic bullet. It is, I think, understanding you have resources in the community. I don't know whether you're using them and they're focused on South City. And then if the new supermarket, if you're going to work with the owner, and it sounds like you are, of that shopping area, and you upgrade that and you begin to work, is to figure out the jobs and how you get in front of that by months or a year to get people from this neighborhood, giving them the first opportunity, and what's the skills they need to do that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If all hearts and minds are clear for the moment, we want to thank you all again. Dave, anything to wrap up?
I have a couple of thank yous with
yes,
your permission.
Please.
I'd like to first of all, I would like to thank all of the elected officials for asking us to take this on. I mean, it was an extremely interesting and personally satisfying experience for all of us. I want to thank the manager and her leadership team and all the city staff that came almost at a moment's notice. Whenever we had a question. They really did. I mean, this morning was a good example of it. In particular, I want to thank Chris Edwards. He really was great in terms of pulling all this together for us and keeping us on task. there are so many people in the community that we could thank. We listed them on a slide. We'll be here all night if I go through that again, but we are not unmindful of the contribution they have made by meeting with us and talking to us not only about their aspirations but about their concerns. Lastly, I want to thank the ULI support team, Margaret Genesee, Reggie Boudier, Rob Palmer, Joe Loretto, Kirk Windland, Irene Lombardo. I want to single out two people. One is Carolyn Clark, who is the ULI staff person in Jacksonville, who was indispensable in pulling all this together. Awesome. She's waving at us now. And I want to thank my colleague at Hopping Green and Sam's, Jennifer Kalinsky, for the role that she's played in this. I told the story earlier that Jennifer came to me about a month ago and said, would you suggest some names for this panel? And then she came back and said, would you be on the panel? And then she came back and said, would you chair the panel? And I told her today that I've left standing instructions. If she comes looking for me again, I am not available. I've enjoyed it as much as anyone. It's been very, very satisfying for all of us, not the least those of us who live here in Tallahassee and who had an opportunity to make a contribution. So thank you very much, Mayor and Commissioners.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's get some stuff done. Thank you.